From the creators who brought you RuPaul's Drag Race and $1 Million Listing, this is World of Wonder's Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Wow Report. I think it's going to be a good one. We are counting down the top 10 things of the week that made us go wow.
Wow.
I'm Fenton Bailey, co-founder of World of Wonder, joined by, that's our Chief Creative Officer, Tom Campbell.
Hello, hello, hello. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And editor of the Wow Report, James St. James.
Yay. Anybody, I wish you could have been with us a few seconds ago because James is coming in hot, everybody. Hot.
I know, exactly. I can't wait. Let's get to it. This is our 335th show, in case you were counting. Might be the last, right? Let's start the countdown. Number 10, Tom.
Number 10.
I want to talk about Barbara Walters. Passed away over the holidays. We haven't had a chance to talk about it. I had the great privilege, truly the great privilege, of working closely with her for about a year as she was developing The View and launched it on the air to become the huge success that it is today and the longevity. Flashing back, by the time I met Barbara Walters, she was 67 years young. She had been on the Today Show
basically is what we're saying.
Say again?
Your age. So basically,
yes, she's older than I am now. Older than all of us, thank God. She had started off as an intern at Today Show and left after 13 years as a co-anchor. She was the first ever female anchor person. She was humiliated publicly for making $1 million a year, parodied by Gilda Radner as Baba Wawa. Went on to rebuild her news cred, interviewing heads of state from Cuba to Russia to the Middle East. Sort of created the celebrity interview, which ended up being Barbara Walters interviews. She talked to every A-list celebrity at the time. And she also co-hosted 2020, one of the most successful news magazines of all time. And then she met me. And then she came to ABC Daytime, where I was working at the time, heard that we were looking for a new talk show because we had a couple of shows that hadn't performed well. And she pitched a show called Everyone's a Critic. And she wanted to get women from different generations to sit around a table and talk about pop culture events. And the title changed, The View, but her vision for the show never did. Like every great idea, everyone except for us at Daytime, everyone at ABC wanted to talk her out of it. The news people, I think Roone Arledge was still alive, said this will be the end of your career.
Why was that, Tom? Why did people think it was going to be a disaster?
Because there was such a huge gulf between news and entertainment, a line that we now know no longer exists. And Barbara was way ahead of her time and could do both. And they just also thought that Daytime was a ghetto, and why do that? Barbara, I got to sit down with her in some of the first meetings. She pitched the show, and I was in LA and she was in New York, and I didn't hear the initial pitch. And I asked my bosses at the time, well, why does she want to do this? They're like, we don't know. We're just happy she does. So I got to sit with her, and she pumped me for my knowledge. All I did was bask in the light of Barbara Walters. She wanted to know what makes Daytime work, and I gave her an answer. I can't remember what I said. I can't imagine what I told Barbara Walters. Then she asked me, what makes Oprah? And then what makes Rosie O'Donnell so popular? Oprah was at the height of her success. Rosie was a year into her show. She was the queen of nice, and I kind of gave my response. And I realized after I started to answer that question that Barbara had invented the world and the roles that now Oprah and Rosie had taken. And she wanted her piece of the pie. And she also said very unabashedly, everything at ABC News was a work for hire. She wanted to own her own show. So she co-produced The View. Bill Geddes was her producer and a brilliant man as well. And she said to me in lots of terms, she wanted it to be her retirement condo on television. She was 67. She didn't know if she could keep going as fast as she had been going. And she still wanted a place she could drop into. And I got to tell you, at 67, it was like competing with an intern who was going to be the president of the network someday. She had so much energy, so much vim and vigor, and so much experience. Couple of stories. One is everyone at the network, once Barbara pitched the show, wanted it to be different because that's what network people do. They buy a show and they want it to be different. And so they didn't like the idea that Barbara would be on once or twice a week. and that there'd be all these different women that, that they couldn't get big enough stars. So I said, okay, trying to be the pleasing person to my bosses, what if we tell Barbara she just has to be there every day, and we'll surround her with the biggest women in New York that week? And they all were like, my bosses were like, go tell Barbara that, you tell her. So I went and I told Barbara that. And without switching her face, she said, that's a great idea. That's a great show. You should do it with someone else, because that's not the show I pitched you.
Oh, I love that. I think The
Music's
View is a genius format. It's funny because I love her, but I never really loved her interviews. But I just think The View is a
Well,
masterpiece.
can
There's
we talk
amazing.
about some of those interviews? Because after she died, there was a million of those sort of the faux pas interviews that she did, where she asked Monica Lewinsky why she couldn't make the president come. Do you remember that one where she was saying, why didn't you bring him to ejaculation? And it was like, you asked, and Katharine Hepburn, what kind of tree would you be? I mean, like there were some where she
in fairness, on the tree question, Katharine Hepburn had said prior to her asking that she was a tree. And so Barbara followed up with, well, what kind of tree would you be?
But it became one of the biggest memes of the 1970s and 80s.
Listen,
I mean, like,
we were talking before this started on another topic about how hard it is for morals shift from decade to decade and generation to generation. Barbara Walters has happened to exist for about 50 years. So I think some of that is owned up to that. Some of it, she was a show woman and she knew how to get ratings. And a lot of it, I do say, because she was a great friend of gay and lesbians. And she would always ask kind of the uninformed question of trans people so they could respond with a very smart and measured response. She'd always ask kind of like, well, isn't it odd that, or how strange it must be that? And so people could counter that. But couple of stories.
One of the things that I find about her death, though, that interests me more than her life, which I know and I understand, where she stands in history and everything like that. But there is this shift lately that when someone dies, there is this just oversaturation of going too far with the flashbacks and everything like that. The minute she died, ABC interrupted its programming and had ready and locked and loaded. They had a 2-hour special on her that just aired like 10 seconds after she died, and it became sort of like when Queen Elizabeth died. And after about the third or fourth day, you were like, "Dear God, let her rest in peace. I don't need another recap of her 1970 interview with Menachem Begin. Like, I just don't care."
That sadly is a state of the media today. I've stopped watching the news. I've not seen one Barbara Walters tribute online.
Well, I don't know how you could avoid it, because literally it was wall-to-wall coverage on every single channel for 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours after she died.
Not if you watch QVC and Turner Classic Movies exclusively. Then you're safe. I'm telling you now. I want to end with these two things you don't know. Barbara Walters, at age 67, had a rocking bod. She came one night to a casino night that was filled with soap opera stars, like dealing cards and rolling dice for advertisers, for people from Prell and Charmin. And because The View was launching, Barbara said she would come to the casino night. And she came, but she was going next to like some tribute to Michael Eisner, and she was in the skin tight black turtleneck with this rocking bod, this bubble designer dress that James would know and I don't. And she got there at 7:00 on sharp, and she was standing around, and all the sales guys were like, "Hey, Barbara, glad you're here." And she leaned to me and she said, "Why am I standing here? Why aren't I meeting people? Introduce me to people immediately. Like, I'm here. Let's press some skin and make some friends." So she did all that. I also got to see her once in her news office, and Hugh Downs came in. Hugh Downs was her co-anchor on 2020. And Barbara had he had been a big deal her whole life. And Barbara had eclipsed his by a lot. When he walked in that office, she stood up from what she was doing, paid total attention to him. Being a woman in the business, she knew how to be gracious, feminine, hard, relentless, all these things to all different people. There wasn't a moment she wasn't sort of navigating her way in her life. And it was so impressive. And the last thing I'll say is that during my time with Barbara Walters, the end of my time at ABC Daytime, my mother was very sick and passed away from cancer. And it was a beautiful handwritten note from Barbara Walters, very aware of what was going on. And just, again, I'm sure she's written a million of those to a million different people, but that she was of this old school and was gracious and kind throughout. And I felt like I learned something for every moment I was with her. I have a million more stories, but I'm losing everyone, including James, so I'll stop.
Rest in power, Barbara Walters. I love that you came up with the view, Tom. I love it. Number 9, James.
Number 9.
Glass Onion on Netflix is now not off the theaters and on Netflix. I did not like it. I think the hype was so big going into it that I had higher expectations than what it delivered. I think it was hackneyed and corny. I thought the characters were annoying. The only person who came off was Janelle Monáe, who is absolutely just translucent. I mean, she's translucent. She's absolutely luminous in this. She's so beautiful. She's so fantastic. Kate Hudson has a few good lines. Catherine Hahn, who is usually so brilliant in everything, is very underutilized here. The first Knives Out, if you remember, was an indictment of old money. It was about how silly old money can be. This is about the nouveau riche. This is the opposite of that. This is about new money. It's about one percenters. It's about crooked politicians, social media influencers. Ed Norton is obviously playing Elon Musk. He is doing a tech billionaire who everyone thinks is brilliant, a genius, but is actually an idiot. And he invites everybody onto his island to have a murder mystery. And then it's supposed to be a game, and it turns into a real murder mystery, and it goes on and on. There are cameos. There's some fun cameos. Angela Lansbury and Stephen Sondheim are in their last appearances ever on film. Ethan Hawke, Serena Williams, Joseph Gordon-Levitt has an audio cameo where he's the bong whenever the clock goes off. It's bong, and it's Joseph Gordon-Levitt's voice. Natasha Lyonne, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Yo-Yo Ma, Jake Tapper is in it. It's fun with all these sort of cameos that happen. Interestingly, though, my takeaway from all of this is that 2022 gave us 3 movies about obnoxious one percenters and social media influencers trapped on an island. There's Glass Onion, The Menu, and Triangle of Sadness.
And you, James, have seen them all.
I have seen them all, and I'm here to say that Glass Onion is the least interesting and least intelligent of them. I think Triangle of Sadness is the one to watch.
Okay, I watched that last night. It was really good.
It's really fantastic. It is so smart, so funny. Blake Fenton is shaking his head like, I don't even know about this. After I've told him to watch it for 30 days in a row.
I watched it, and after 2 hours, Nolan turned to me and says, I really can't watch any more of this, because it definitely starts well and then goes off. By the time the boat blows up, we're done. And it's just going on.
Come on, by the time there's the 10-minute vomit scene, didn't that pull Nolan back in?
I love that, but then it went on too long. Anyway,
but once you get to the island and there's the woman who takes over, her name is Dolly De Leon, the Filipino woman who is who is the legend there. Don't you think she deserved an Oscar for that?
No. And I have a question for you.
Is this because I told you were going to like it and you're fighting me?
I watched The Glass Onion, and I thought it was so bad. I was like, I don't understand. All the reviews have raved about this film.
Yeah.
I was like, what is happening here? And then I saw an article about how movies that have done well in the theater show up on Netflix and everybody hates it. Like, I thought it was an interesting. Tom's gone.
Well, I think there is. I think we are seeing again how important it is to see movies in theaters to get the theatrical experience of the movie. There's something about seeing it with an audience laughing. Because I saw Triangle of Sadness.
Theater is not going to be any better. I mean, it's just awful.
But I saw Triangle of Sadness in a movie theater that the audience was loving every second of it and laughing and applauding and and cheering and standing up and everything like that. Whereas maybe when you see it alone with Nolan and you're rolling your eyes because James told you to like it and you're determined you aren't going to like it just because I told you to. I know how that one works. I know that knee-jerk reaction that you get whenever I tell you to watch something.
My ability to focus is much sharper in a theater and much worse when I'm watching at home.
Well, we have a
Oh,
big
that's true because you're on your phone the entire time and you're getting up and you're moving and you're pausing and stopping and everything like that, and you don't
We
get the
actually
flow.
said it would be better to watch in the theater, like last night when we were watching it.
It is. It was when everybody is cheering and applauding that, like, the vomit scene, and it just people are, like some people are getting up and walking out because of it. It was just, it really creates a mood.
All right, that's great. So we've reviewed 2 movies, The Glass Onion and Triangle of Sadness,
And we're
and,
gonna do Triangle of Sadness every week until someone agrees with me that it's a good movie.
number 8,
Number 8.
A Very Merida Christmas. That's right. I took the kids to an Airbnb in Merida in Yucatan, on the beach. Let me just say this about that. Like, Airbnbs, what an amazing invention, what an amazing thing, and how great they look in the pictures. And then you get there and your beachfront mansion, yes, it is on the beach, but it is in the middle of a building site. And someone told me, they said, "Oh, didn't you Google Earth? Because that's what you're supposed to do if you're going to go to
Oh,
an
of course.
Airbnb. Google Earth the environ, because this place was right in the middle of a building site. And it had been photographed in such a way that you couldn't see that the doors didn't open or close, and that the exposed wiring, and that when you turned on the tap, the smell of sulfur was just so overwhelming you wanted to gag. So it wasn't quite as it was in the pictures, but it was lovely. It was lovely, and we had an
I have
amazing.
to applaud you, Fenton, because none of your Instagram posts gave away any of that. Very well done. Very well played.
Exactly.
But wait, my
Airbnb
whole
look
problem.
good on Instagram, and I wasn't going to destroy the illusion. God damn it.
But isn't the big problem with Airbnbs is the fact that they have that cleaning fee that is like twice the amount
Oh,
of
this was even better. This Airbnb, they said, you can have a chef, and here's a menu, and you just choose the items. So we're like really excited. The chef was going to cook for us, chose the items, show up, and they're like, we're like, well, where's the first night we arrived late, and it's like, where's the dinner? And they were like, you didn't bring the food? And we're like, no, you're the chef. Here's the menu. We were supposed to buy the ingredients. So the chef thing didn't quite work out either. But and then there was this cyclone bomb over most of the United States, and we were very glad to be out of that. But there was a sort of storm around the periphery that came to Merida for like 3 days of howling, shrieking winds and waves whipping off the water and floods and power cuts. It was just high drama. It was fun.
Quick question. Did you hear Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You more than you heard Feliz Navidad? Which one did you hear more?
Feliz Navidad for sure. And it was like
Did you
Christmas
hear Me
Eve.
Burrito?
What?
Me Burrito that I talked about last time?
Oh,
Me
I didn't hear Me
Burrito.
Burrito. That's true. I didn't hear Me Burrito. Well, I tell you what we did do. We went to some ruins, and we also went to this thing called a cenote or cenote. I don't know how you pronounce it, but basically it's a sinkhole. And there are these dotted all over. They're unique to the Yucatan, and they're dotted all over the place. And you drive up, and it doesn't look like anything other than a hole in the ground. But then this beautiful freshwater pond, lake, sort of really deep too. They're like, maybe like 60 feet underground. And then the water's crystal clear, and it goes really deep. It goes so deep that you can go scuba diving. But kids like to go and jump off. It was absolutely gorgeous. So that's and Trey, of course, has moved down to Merida, so he has a place there. So we saw him on Christmas Eve. So it's really, there's a huge sort of expat community there too, and it's really lovely.
Would you ever consider retiring in Mexico?
I don't think so. I got the most appalling. I didn't drink the water, and everything was great. And then the day we had to fly back, I woke up at like 2 a.m. and I was like, made a mad dash, and I was clenching my buttocks all the way from the Yucatan back home, and rushing into the loos at the airport and what have you. Too much information,
God.
right?
Speaking of burritos.
So, James, you don't seem interested at all in going to
No.
Merida.
In fact, I am fascinated by the ruins and by the pyramids and all that stuff. I think that's all. I would love to go and take a vacation in Mexico and just do those old Rococo churches, those Baroque, those fantastic churches that they have in cathedrals. That would be a dream of mine, to do the ruins and cathedrals of Mexico. I think that's all
And why
fascinating.
did I guess, from the Egyptian pyramids to the pyramids in Angkor Wat and the Mayan ruins and the Aztec, like, what gave everybody the idea to build pyramids?
Well, the aliens, of course. Don't you watch Ancient Aliens? It's my
I
favorite
like
TV show on
you, but I'm
television.
sort of like, I mean, I
Because
guess
they're
so.
power stations. We know that they're power stations, and that's how the UFOs got onto and off of the planet, was by having these, it's giant magnetic and electronic gatherers that they use.
So we have glass onions and they had stone pyramids.
The nice way to tie it all up. Now,
All
moving
right,
along, we're
okay,
moving on
James,
to the
what
commercial.
kind of tree are you?
Well, I couldn't make the president come. That was my biggest problem in the 1990s. I tried.
Maybe not the president of the United States, but I bet the president of
Of the Rotary Club.
Elk Lodge or something.
The Elk Lodge, yes.
Let's take a break. Today is premiere day, season 15, RuPaul's Drag Race. On Wow Presents Plus worldwide, excluding US, Canada, Australia, and in the US for the first time on MTV.
Double episode, limited commercials, Ariana Grande. Woo!
Oh, fantastic. We'll be right after the break, carrying on our countdown of the things that made us go wow this week.
But Blake, first, you have a question for us.
Sure, I do. Sure. Who just found out they are direct descendant of Pocahontas and John Rolfe on PBS's Finding Your Roots, which just premiered?
We really will be back after the break with the answer.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
Welcome back to the Wow Report. I'm Fenton here with Tom and James and Blake with a question.
Yes. Who just found out they are a direct descendant of Pocahontas and John Rolfe on the 9th season premiere of PBS's Finding Your Roots?
Well, I'll give you a hint, everyone. I just spoke about them in the last segment.
You did.
Yeah.
That's why I asked this question.
Uh-huh. It's Ed Norton. But, the thing is about that is that by the time you get to your great-great-great-great-grandmother, you have 17,000 possibilities in there. So the chances that you're related to someone famous is like 1 in 17, is 17,000, So
I think
it's
you're
not
just
that big of a
jealous.
deal.
I
What?
think you're jealous.
Well, I think I'm probably related to Pocahontas if I go back far enough,
I know.
think we
I
all
was
are.
thinking that too. Yeah.
So
We're
proud.
counting down the top 10 things that made us go wow. We've reached number 7. Tom.
Number 7.
Speaking of feeling old, I watched the the concert for the induction of this past year's Hall of Fame, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There, I said it. And I thought of you guys a lot. I watched this when I was home with my brother and sister, but it was just a lot of the artists that have sort of definitional for me, and I think for us. The first for me, maybe more than you guys, but Pat Benatar and her husband Neil Giraldo were indoctrinated, and they performed. They looked older but sexy, and he especially was really hot.
I had such a crush on him growing up. He's so hot. Yeah.
And I there was so much heavy metal played when I was in high school and I was a teen, and I was listening to the Captain Tennille and Olivia Newton-John, and Pat Benatar kind of helped beard me a little bit because I love female vocalists, and I love me some Pat Benatar, so I could play her like on my boombox coming home from track meetings on the bus, and I could pass as straight one more day. So thank you, Pat. Also, another reunion, Eurythmics were indoctrinated into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Annie Lennox, they're both amazing, but Annie Lennox is just out of this world. She performed and she was crazy. And you think about all the talk now of the non-binary, and it's present in every generation, right? And they personified it. Supposedly she lives in West Hollywood, not too far from me. She's been seen at Joey's Cafe. So if you think you see Annie Lennox in West Hollywood's Joey's Cafe, it might be her.
She was always so
fascinating.
stylish and glamorous. What did she wear? What was she looking like?
I just remember she's very plain now. She doesn't overdo it, but her performance is amazing. Her voice is amazing. Duran Duran, who you guys love, who I do not get into their music.
No, hate them. Can't stand them.
Oh my God.
Really?
It really
No,
changed my life. Changed my life when I was 14.
Take it from someone who cannot sing. I just don't think the lead singer of Duran Duran can sing. He's always sort of shouting.
But it was about pretty boys in Versace outfits wearing makeup, and it was all about the videos where they were on in Rio.
MTV, Pat Benatar, Eurythmics, right?
Yeah, it was a moment in time where it was like for somebody stuck in Saginaw, Michigan, to see those videos of them traipsing about,
Like, imagine James, like he loved One Direction and stuff back in the day. Imagine them in drag.
True.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because you picked your whether you were a Nick person, a John person, and looking back now, Roger was the hot one. I'm just saying that I didn't realize at the time how hot Roger was, but now Roger was the pick of the crop.
Well, thank God you were able to set the record straight here at the Wow Report. I'm very proud of you.
Yeah.
Other names, and I won't go with them all. Carly Simon, Lionel Richie, rock. Well, okay. Judas Priest, and the lead singer whose name I forget said, "Oh, by the way, I'm the gay one," which I love.
Rob Halpern, what is his name?
Because it feels a little heterosexual. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame feels, they try very hard to be inclusive, but it feels a little and Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, who did define the Janet sound and just the sound of the mid 80s. Did I say Eminem already? He was there. And there were others, including the first ever lawyer, Alan Grubman, was associated. So that's a bad thing. But last but not least, and another woman that I had the great privilege of working with for a brief time in the 80s, Dolly Parton was fine, and there was the controversy because at first she was on the short list. She said, "Please, I'm not rock and roll, don't do it." Well, she showed up, and she is the only performer who wrote an original song for the thing. And she sat there and she sang like basically how she's rock and roll, and she dropped names all these rock and rollers, just sweet as pie. And the delivery was very kind of hillbilly, but someone else could record that song and make it fantastic. And then there was an incredible array of women, rock and rollers from all ages and all times singing Jolene. And that was really hair tingling, because that is just the best fucking song ever.
Over the New Year's, she was with Miley Cyrus on Miley's Rockin' New Year's Eve. And they rocked out together. I mean, Dolly can do it all. Dolly can do rock and roll as well as anyone. And when she was with Miley, you couldn't tell who was the younger and who was the older. She is ageless.
No, she's everywhere and in the best way. And I know you'd mentioned her Christmas special was a little corny, but she can swing from there to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yes. God bless Dolly. God bless Dolly Parton and all the inductees to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
It's interesting because you talk. I'm sorry, but you talk about in high school what Pat Benatar meant to you. And I remember in high school, it was the girls. I've said this before. You were either a Belinda Carlisle or you were a Pat Benatar. And there was no, it was like everyone looked like either one or the other when I was growing up. I love that.
That is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame streaming on HBO Max. Number 6, James.
Number 6.
Number 6, I watched a movie that you might not have heard of. It was filmed in 2021, and it just came out now on streaming. It's called Benediction. It's on Netflix, Hulu, Apple TV. I think it might be on HBO Max as well. It is a biopic of the World War I era poet who was a gay man named Siegfried Sassoon. I don't know. He was one of the bright young things in the 1920s with Cecil Beaton and that whole crowd. He wrote these haunting and harrowing poems about life in the trenches in World War I. And you forget that World War I, nobody had ever seen anything like it before. It was the first time there were tanks. It was the first time there were planes. It was the first time there were aerial bombs and grenades. And the horror of the life in the trench was something that destroyed a whole generation. Millions of boys didn't come home in England, in France, in Germany. It really affected, and it was sort of the reason why the 20s took off the way they did. It was a reaction to the horror. Everyone was dancing and trying their hardest to forget the horrors of the Spanish, flu and World War I. So anyway, this is weird because it goes back and forth, and he reads his poetry over this sort of crackly black and white footage from World War I in the trenches of bombs and tanks, and you have these rotting corpses, real pictures of rotting corpses and men being mangled, men with their faces blown off and everything, and the poetry, and then it flashes back and forth to his life in the 1920s, where he's this sort of the bright young things, and he's in his tuxedo, and he's with Cecil Beaton, and he's having an affair with Ivor Novello, who was a big queen at the time, who was a dance hall singer-songwriter. He was very famous in silent movies. And then he goes, and he's very bitchy and very catty queens back and forth, and the dialogue is crackling and everything like that. And he has another affair with Stephen Tennant, who was a giant towering figure in society in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And then it also then switches into the 1970s, where he's an old man now, played by Peter Capaldi, who is Doctor Who, and he's this bitter old queen who has been largely forgotten. His poetry is forgotten, and he's married now, and he has a child, and he's given up his gay lifestyle, and he's just very bitter about being forgotten, and he takes it out on his wife and his son, so it goes from this harrowing war scenes to the crackling 1920s gay bitchiness scenes to like this life as a has-been, and it switches back and forth. Jeremy Irvine plays Ivor Novello. He's very hot. Everybody is really fantastic in it, but it's this uneven movie. It's beautifully done. It's beautifully photographed. The cinematography is fantastic. The dialogue is crackling in the 1920s. It's fascinating. I don't know if anyone else but me could watch 3 hours of this.
I know what's the point of the story. Like, it just.
Well, Siegfried Sassoon is somebody who has been lost to history, but whose poetry deserves to be rediscovered again, because it is some of the most beautiful poetry ever written, up there with like Lord Byron and Shakespeare. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. And his place in as one of the bright young things, which is perpetually, interesting to certain people, that sort of Cecil Beaton crowd.
Except poems are movies about poets. Isn't the big genre of like, oh my God, this is going to be a massive movie. I haven't seen a movie about T.S. Eliot or. I mean, my God!
Like, but are you saying there shouldn't be a movie about T.S. Eliot because that bores you? Are you saying that these biopics shouldn't exist because you don't care about poetry?
I'm not saying that. I'm just wondering.
Well, this is what it sounds like what you were just saying. It sort of sounds like you're doing one of your knee-jerk reactions to my things again. Like the minute I say it's interesting, you say poetry is boring. Poetry is dead. We shouldn't have movies about poets.
Just name another movie about a poet that really blew you away.
What about Lawrence? What about like
Shakespeare in Love?
There you go.
Hated it. Did you love it, James? I mean, I did.
I thought it was fascinating. Okay. Of course, I have a soft spot for those bright young things and the queens. I think that Edith Sitwell. I think Cecil Beaton, Stephen Tennant, Nancy. I think all of them were fascinating. They were the club kids of the 1920s. How could you not like that? They were the ones. They were the boy Georges of the 1920s. The men were wearing makeup and dresses, and they were the ones changing the world back then.
Okay, I promise you, we'll return to this. All right,
money, success, fame, glamour.
Exactly, they were the Michael Ehrlichs of the 1920s.
All right, moving on to number 5.
Number 5.
I just want to wrap up a little bit about Mexico. So, speaking of feeling old, where we were staying in Mexico over Christmas was where 65 million years ago the meteor that wiped out the dinosaurs landed. We were literally right there in Chicxulub. And so we did a little bit of culture. We went to the Museum of the Meteor, and we also went to the Sendero Jurassico, which is like this fabulous outdoor park with giant replicas of dinosaurs all around. And the amazing thing is it doesn't open till 5 o'clock. So you go in at 5 o'clock as the sun is setting, and you get this fabulous sunset with all these like giant dinosaurs and T-Rexes around. And there's a lake also. It's very flat around there. And there's a lake, and they put like giant skeletons of Diplodocuses and Brontosauruses sticking out of the water. It's very dramatic.
Is Elliot in his dinosaur phase?
Yes, he loved it.
Love that?
Absolutely loved it. Now, of course, I was expecting to see some sort of evidence of this crater, but I guess, it was 65 million years ago. And this meteorite, it was like something like 6 miles wide and created a crater that was like 110 miles wide and 12 miles deep. But there is actually a connection here, because the swimming holes I mentioned, the cenotes or the sinkholes, they were actually created. So the meteorite hits, goes 12 miles deep, throws all this shit up into the air, which then rains down and created these holes in the ground. And I didn't know this, but all these sinkholes link in a semicircle, because half of the meteor was on land and half was in the sea. So there is this sort of trace element, and these things that you're swimming around in are 65 million year old, created by the meteorite. Isn't that amazing?
I'm just imagining having a job that starts at 5 p.m. Is that wrong?
Right?
It is amazing. And I love how you full circled it. But how cool.
Right.
No, it's amazing. Did you get, we went once in Connecticut, they had discovered, a construction site had discovered dinosaur bones. So you could go, and they had cast them, so you could go and make a plaster of Paris of a dinosaur foot, and then you would paint it and bring it to school for every show and tell until you dropped it and broke it.
That's fun.
I tell you, the dinosaurs, they've just discovered recently that they were feathered, right? And when you look at birds, the chicken is the modern survivor of dinosaurs. Do you know that? Yeah. It's just, I don't know. It leaves me sort of gobsmacked, and I don't really have mind-bending insights, but they were just really big.
Wonder if when we have time machines, if going back to the dinosaurs, what you would actually see, what they would sound like, what they would actually, right. It is just like you say the feathers and the colors are all off. That what we think, we thought they were all green and slimy, but they aren't.
Well, maybe T-Rex was a drag queen, and that's why he has such little arms, so he just death dropped. Boom. Feathers, boom.
I love that. I love that.
So we're really eating like dinosaur meat all the time.
Right. And it's delicious. Tastes like chicken. All right, let's take a break. Blake, have you got a question for us?
I do. Talking of snacks, what is a single strand of spaghetti called?
A teasing, provocative question. We'll have the answer right after the break here on the Wow Report on Radio Andy.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
Welcome back to the Wow Report. It's Benson here with James and Tom and Blake. And a very teasing question, Blake.
Yes. What is a single strand of spaghetti called? And I got this from the Today Show. They posted like 150 silly trivia questions, so it's true.
Would it be spaghetto or spaghettum?
It is spaghetto.
Oh! Well, then raviolios is a real word. Then raviolios, spaghetto. It's all the
That's
O's.
Hysterical.
Well done, James.
Very good, James. We're getting down the top 10 things that made us go wow. We've reached number 4.
Number 4.
Speaking of growing old, I have another rest in peace this week, and it is for Anita Pointer of the underrated famous Pointer Sisters. They were clients of Gallimore when I worked there, as was Dolly Parton, and I got to see them perform so many times live, and it was brilliant. My only personal interaction was they were famous because they were sisters and they worked together. And Ruth, Anita, and Baby June were together. Bonnie was out of the group by the time I was there, and they came to see their manager Jim Morey of Gallimore Associates, and they came stomping through the office by my desk into Jim Morey. Actually, they were like, hello, hello, hello. They're kind of, the door closed, and there was like a half hour of three women screaming at the top of their lungs. Couldn't make out words. A few choice words you could. There was something. Then after, I swear to God, it was a half hour screaming. And then door opened and they paddled out. I don't know what they talked about. I don't know what they negotiated. I know that Jim Morey, God rest his soul, was a very special pasty white that day, especially white that day. No blood in his head whatsoever. But the music they made, I don't know what you guys think, but they started off kind of as a 40s swing band in the early 70s, and Anita was really the voice of the group through their early hits. Bet you got a chick on the side. Sure, you got a chick. I know you got a chick on the side. And also, I know we can make it. Yes, we can. I know we can.
Hell yeah.
They had a bunch of number one hits and hit singles during the 70s, like He's So Shy, Slow Hand,
Oh yeah.
Fever, most of
Okay.
those things. And until they hooked up with Richard Perry, who's a mythical record producer, did Carly Simon, so many others, he put an album together with them called Breakout. And they shared the lead vocals on that. And it started off with a single called Automatic with Ruth. No way to control it. It's totally automatic. Followed by June Pointer, Baby June, her soulful solo singing Jump, which happened to coincide with the 84 Olympics. And it was all this Olympic footage on MTV.
Wait, I thought that Jump was on the Footloose soundtrack. What was
Nope.
the one? No,
That was,
okay.
They weren't on that. They weren't on that.
Oh,
And then they repressed the album and put on a song that had been a hit, but not a huge hit, which had mastered second time, called I'm So Excited, with Anita Pointer doing the thing. And I'm So Excited was the song used in every movie trailer about an upbeat movie for about 15 years.
Yeah.
It'd be like, what happens when this happens and this happens? Bump, 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 bump. I'm so excited. Ooh-wee.
And it's the song that Jessie Spano danced to when she had too many caffeine.
Oh
pills.
yes. Oh, and she starts crying and she says, "I'm so excited" when they're trying. When they give her the
scared. Yeah,
I'm so scared when she was addicted to uppers.
And on that same album, they had the hit from Beverly Hills Cop, Neutron Dance, which was a huge hit.
It's interesting. You mention all these songs, and they're all huge songs, and I remember them so well. But it sort of seems like they got relegated to the dustbin of history a little bit because they aren't replayed or remembered is in the same breath as some of the other,
which
disco
is nuts.
acts.
In 1984, I moved. It was my first summer in LA. I was looking for a job. I was driving everywhere in a way that felt so alien because it's LA and you're driving everywhere. You don't know where you're going. And the Pointer Sisters, I'm So Excited, was playing on every radio station. So was Prince's When Doves Cry. And I used to drive so fast. And I thought if I died while listening to a Pointer Sister song, I would be fine. But we had Anita and Ruth, after June's unfortunate passing, they were guests on RuPaul's Drag Race. So we got to meet them and bow down to them. And just, again, you're right. With all this talk of the best singers of all time in Rolling Stone, which everyone's complaining wasn't on, or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which has Dolly Parton, Lionel Richie, whatever. It's like, all these lists don't mean anything. It's there's so much talent.
It does sort of feel sad that there needs to be a Pointer Sisters, revival, I think, because they did contribute so much.
That album was so epic, but did they have any hits after that? It was like a sort of...
It's funny because I used to I worked for the management company, and I would roll, Diet Coke was a sponsor of theirs. They had Diet Coke commercial, and I would roll Diet Coke towels and CDs and put them in FedEx packages to send them to DJs so that people would play their songs. They had Dare Me. They had like 2 or 3 more or 4 more albums with RCA. None had huge hits. There's some great music there, but music had kind of moved on They'd been around for a while. But Sandy Gallen of Gallimore Associates, what he did is he put together an act for them. And these women, I was told by the record producer when I was someone who worked for Richard Perry when I first moved out here, that they were known to be party girls. And one of them would put a mattress. I think Baby June would put a mattress in her garage. So when she came home, she'd know when to stop her car when it hit the wall. But Sandy put together this killer act.
Oh my God, that is the funniest detail I've heard in ages.
It's so good. Boom! When I hit the wall, I know it's okay. Put a mattress there. Don't stop drinking. Just put a mattress there. But they had a Vegas act that made them millions. I'd like to think that they were comfortable with the rest of their lives. And the difference that a good manager can do. And Sandy Gallen, who managed Dolly Parton, who managed so many of the big people, also managed the Pointer Sisters.
See, James, I'd like to see a movie about Sandy Gallen.
Yeah. You know what I call it? Tell Them This, which is another story we'll save for another time. Benson knows it. But he would reframe, there'd be a problem. He would reframe it all by saying, tell them this. And we'll get into that story another time.
All right. Okay. Let's move on then. Number 3, James.
Number 3.
Saturday Night at the Baths, which sounds like a confession. It sounds like I'm about to tell you what I did over the weekend, but it is not. It is a forgotten gay movie from 1974. Now, I thought that I had known all of the gay movies of that period, Boys in the Band, Making Love, we talked about Funeral Parade of Roses, which I discovered a few weeks ago, the Japanese, set in the Japanese drag club, 1970s, The Ritz Cruising, Dog Day Afternoon, Cabaret, Staircase, Gay Deceivers. All of those movies happened in the 1970s, but I had never heard of this. And this movie is set in the Continental Baths. The owner of the Continental Baths produced the movie. So it is set in the baths. The extras are actual bath customers. Okay, they paid 800 of the customers $1 a piece to be in the movies. You see them wandering around in their towels in the background the entire movie, and they have those 70s bods. You forget how awful 70s gay bodies were. Skinny, gay, white with hair everywhere and hairy backs and all that stuff. And so it's the gays, and it stars a guy named Robert Aberdeen, who is still working. And interestingly, the story is he's a piano player who is a straight piano player who was hired to come into the baths and be the backup piano player for a diva who is breaking out big time. And she's this fabulous woman played by Jane Orville. And she performs in front of the men in their towels while they're having sex. And over the course of the movie, he's straight. He has this girlfriend, and he befriends the manager. And then he and the manager and the girlfriend start to have a threesome, and then they don't. And then by the end, he kicks the girlfriend out and he's having sex with the man.
So it's sort of the Bette Midler, Barry Manilow story.
Well, it's very much the Barry Manilow story, because wasn't Barry married, I think, at the time in the early 70s? Something like that. I'm not sure. But it's very much, sounds like the Barry Manilow story. It's really the movie is crap. The writing is crap. The story, it looks like it was shot in a potato by, it looks like it was just like everything about it is muddy. But it's grainy. Like I said, the acting is terrible. The plot goes nowhere. But the fact that you are actually watching the Continental Baths, you are seeing it is this remarkable piece of history that has just been lost. But
where did you see it? How did you find it?
I was just Amazon Prime. I was on Amazon Prime, and they suggested it to me. They said because no, but they said because you watched Funeral Parade of Roses, the 70s Japanese, movie set that they suggested this to me. And like I said, I'd never heard of it. I didn't know what to expect watching it, and I was just fascinated watching the shenanigans at the Continental Bath. You never see it. You've never seen really goes.
Coming up on season 3 of Night Fever, I'm just editing Man Perish. And there's a story.
Yes, who was there when he was 14. He talks about being at the Continental Baths and seeing Bette Midler there. So it's a fascinating document of 1974 gay life that I don't think you've ever seen before.
You uncovered some dinosaur remains of your own this week.
Exactly.
Some old
So
bones.
Saturday night at the Baths on Amazon Prime. Check it
All
out.
right. All right, moving on. Number 2.
Number 2.
I'm reading a book. It's called The Secret Historian. And it was actually published in 2010. So it's not a new book at all. And it is about Samuel Stewart, the life of Samuel Stewart. Now, James, have you ever heard of Samuel Stewart?
Well, is he the guy who does the? No, I guess I haven't. Tell me.
He knows not to even ask me.
No, it's by Justin Spring, and Samuel Stewart lived in the 40s and 50s. He's kind of like a pre-Stonewall era guy. He grew up in the Midwest, gay, became a professor, didn't like that life, became a tattoo artist, didn't really like that life as Doc Sparrow. Then he became a gay pulp writer called Phil Andros and has written lots and lots of sort of potboilery novels, gay pulp novels. But he led this amazing life and totally gay, never heard of him in my life. But the reason I discovered this was, I don't know, you're just going through the internet. John Kelly, who does Joni Mitchell, the queen who does Joni Mitchell, his latest show is all about the life of this guy, Samuel Stewart. And I was like, oh, that seems interesting. And the thing that really got my attention is that when he was a teenager, Rudolph Valentino went to his hometown, like somewhere stopping in from the way back from Chicago, was in his hometown. He somehow found out, because he is obsessed with movie stars, as 18-year-olds, gay boys will be. He went to Rudolph Valentino's hotel to get his signature. Rudolph Valentino opened the door in a towel, signed it, and said, I'm really rather busy. Is there anything else you want? And Samuel Stewart, 18 years old, said, yes, I want you. And with that, Rudolph Valentino pulled him into the room. And the reason we know this story is that Samuel Stewart would snip off some of their pubic hair, and he collected all these pieces of people's pubic hair and put them in little envelopes and with names. And then he met Alfred Kinsey.
So he was like the original Cynthia Plastercaster.
Yes, I guess he kind of was. He was one of these like gay people who was not only very sexually active, but also a documentarian, like in terms of snipping the pubes. But he also kept this thing called a stud file, and every person he had sex with, he kept on an index card. And he met Alfred Kinsey, who was doing the Kinsey Report, and became this unofficial collaborator and gave him all this information. He was this very brilliant guy. He was a writer. He never really had success. He was Gertrude Stein's best friend and Alice B. Toklas. And he'd go off to France to pursue Jean Genet and had all these sort of wild adventures and had these multiple different lives. And the reason why I'm telling you this, I suppose, it's amazing to me, is that we sort of think, that gay life begins with Stonewall. Well, obviously it doesn't. And what's so amazing, this guy had 80 boxes. The author of this book found 80 boxes of papers and stuff. And it's sort of almost like sort of a pyramid or an archaeological dig of all these lives and this sort of history that just disappears and is often destroyed by loved ones or relatives or destroyed by and so for this to survive is so rare and remarkable. And then you realize in reading it, oh my God, there's like countless people like this.
Like Siegfried Sassoon.
Exactly, James. I'm trying to work my way around to paying tribute to you and saying you were so right about it all along. And spoiler alert, I bought you a copy of the book for Christmas. So
okay,
now you'll have to read
fascinating.
it.
Well, no, because like you say, like, you talk about these forgotten figures, these towering figures of gay society that have gotten lost, and they are, like when you talk about friends with, Jean Genet and Gertrude Stein, it is sort of the same thing as they were, the same kind of iconoclasts and catalysts for so much of gay culture, and we shouldn't forget them. And these biographies are good things. And I sort of can put that together with Siegfried. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that the 20s and the 40s and the 60s, I mean, it all gets lost if we don't document them. And here's somebody who documented so much of gay culture, and I think it's just fascinating.
It also made me think, and I've got to be very careful where I say this, it made me think that in some ways the gay identity, the modern gay identity, has sort of problematized gayness in the sense that you get the impression of reading this story about Samuel Stewart that he could just have sex with anybody. It wasn't really a question of, there wasn't this divide of whether you were gay or not. People were just horny and looking to get it on, and they seemed to get it on so abundantly and so sort
Well,
of
do you think that that has
uncomplicatedly.
something to do with the fact that we're over labeling things, and we have, with the pronouns and the this and the that, and you're bi, you're
Sort of
transgender,
over
you're this.
identifying
We're
things.
over identifying, and people are saying, well, I am not that, whereas opposed to if you didn't have all those labels, nobody could say I'm
Well,
this or that, and everyone just
part of
was.
gender roles, the binary and men and women, is really kind of a marketing
Right.
ploy. You know what I'm saying? It's like, be masculine like this, be feminine like this. It's creating targets to sell to instead of just
Exactly, and it's creating targets for people to say, I am not that, whereas
correct.
opposed to if you didn't have all those labels, then people just were out there having sex, and just it didn't even matter who it was.
And we have a lot more similarities than differences.
Well,
Yeah.
that was definitely the sort of the sense of the takeaway of it. And I also didn't know that Africa. I mean, I love the Kinsey report. Like, I remember reading it as a kid myself, and but I didn't know that Kinsey, who was married, because there's been a film made about Kinsey, right? And his work, but he was so obsessed with this guy, Samuel Stewart, that he actually filmed him having an S&M session with this domination guy that he brought in from New York, and they filmed it over a weekend. And like, I was like, oh my God, sort of academic research suddenly seems a lot more fun than like
Well,
he
it
was
was also how
making
James got his
porno
SAG
movies.
card, so that's nice. It was
I
that kind of
remember in the 80s, there was the Height Report. Do you remember that? Sherry Height did sort of
Yes,
something like with
yes.
Kinsey, and I was obsessed with that too. That was like my porn. That was like how I learned about certain sex acts and things.
everything I know is from Playgirl magazine. So
Yeah, well, don't
Mwah,
get me started on
mwah.
that. Yes.
All right, let's take a quick break. One more break. I will tell you that House of Love is the exclusive drink of RuPaul's Drag Race, just in time for your season 15 viewing parties. 4 delicious cocktails, 2 mouth-watering mocktails. You can order viewing party packs, the All-Star, the Squirrel Friend, Variety Box, and of course the Hall of Fame. Just go to houseoflovecocktails.com and subscribe to the newsletter for discounts and deals. Yay. When we come back,
And as a reminder, you can watch this show on YouTube channel Wow Presents every week for extra content that was cut from the show for time. So please,
Yay.
if you are listening to us on Radio Andy Sirius XM, check us out on YouTube.
And if you want to see, and you want to see James's fabulous new robe.
My Keith Haring robe. Yes.
that is fabulous. Did you get that for Christmas?
I did. It's the warmest robe I've ever had. It's absolutely fantastic.
Maybe you'll take it off when we come back in the final part.
Woohoo! Maybe I'll go to the bathroom and you can watch.
Listening to the Wow Report on Radio Andy.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
Welcome back to the Wow Report. I'm Fenton here with James and Tom and Blake. We've been counting down the top 10 things this week that made us go wow, and we've reached number 1.
Number 1.
A postcard to James and to Blake, because Fenton and I are actually in the UK this week, and you guys are both in LA, and we are here for RuPaul's DragCon UK. And it's starting today, Friday. It is Saturday and Sunday. If you're in and around the XL London, come on down. It's going to be cram-packed with queens from all over the world. And the reason I know that is because I arrived at the hotel yesterday, late last night, and literally there was like 30 or 40 people outside smoking. And like, it's just not like that in the UK. And I'm like, what's going on? And I go through it. And everyone seemed very kind of, I don't know, it seemed very cruisy and gay and outrageous. And the ladies were tall. And then the elevator was full of people with like takeout food and buns. And then, and accents of, and then I realized this is one of the hotels that all the queens are staying in. And it was a scene. DragCon will have a lot to prove to be better than walking through the lobby of this hotel. What was your experience arriving, Fenton?
I arrived a few hours ago, and I got out of the car, and right there was Nikki Doll, host of Drag Race France, having a cigarette. And then I walk inside to check in, and right there, coming out of the gym, is Pangina, host of Drag Race Thailand. So I was like, by the time I got to the elevator, I was wildly overstimulated.
And I'm nervous. There are so many queens now because some of them have talent, like queen badges on today. And I'm like, oh my God, are they the queen? Are they with the queen or are they the queen? I don't recognize them in this bad lighting. So I've worn my mask and tried to be very low key as possible. But I'm really looking forward to DragCon UK and what you and Ru have unleashed onto the world as they all come together in London, England.
Yes, if you're listening to this in the States, just hop on a plane and come on down to the XL for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Tickets at
RuPaul's check our social media, World of Wonder social media, and the RuPaul's DragCon social media will be a buzz. So, if you can't be there in person, come along.
You guys have fun. I have one question. Is it sunny over there? Because we have like London weather here.
I hear it's raining horizontally in Los Angeles right now.
It is terrifying out there. Yeah.
I just hope my pussies don't get wet.
I know. I'm afraid usually if the wind goes over 10 miles an hour, I lose power in my apartment, and I'm terrified that any minute now everything is going to go black.
It's really
James,
raining.
If you can handle some kitty cats, you're always welcome to crash at my place.
All right, thanks for tuning into the WoW Report on Radio and SiriusXM. You can catch previous episodes on our YouTube channel, WoW Presents. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, James. Thank you, Blake. And thank you for listening. Same time, same place next week. Until then, go out and do something that makes the world go wow.
Wow!